Hello and welcome to our today's LufftAcademy webinar. Our topic today will be the configuration of the OPUS20E. That's the version with the external sensors. The webinar today will have two different parts. Let's say it like that. Part one will be more the theoretical part, so I will explain the general features of the OPUS20E and the connection possibilities of the OPUS20E. Part two will be more the practical part, so I will show you how to configure the OPUS20, what are the possibilities. Normally you have two possibilities. You can use the user button or the smart graph 3. So I will show you that in reality. So we will start now. This is the OPUS20E data logger, and we have different types of OPUS20 versions or devices, and this one is the OPUS20 which can be connected to external sensors. Of course, we want you to be active in this webinar. So that means if you have some questions, you can use the questions menu on the right side of your main menu of the webinar tool. You can use this menu and you can enter the questions there, and we will have some breaks where we will answer your questions. Okay? First of all, the general features and functions of the OPUS20. First, power supply. We have three possibilities to power up the OPUS20. That means you will have the possibility to enter batteries, and I will show you that here. So this is the OPUS20 here, and if you open this part here on the OPUS20 at the back part, you will see that you can enter 4 standard AA batteries. You can enter any type of batteries you want, so it's not linked to a special type. Standard AA batteries. Close it, of course. The second way is to connect a mini USB power supply. You have different interfaces here, and this one, the small one, is the mini USB power supply. Normally you will get the cable, which is part of the OPUS20 order, the OPUS20 package. And in addition, you can also order this power supply, which can be connected to the cable via USB here. On one side, standard USB connector. On the small side or on the other side, you have mini USB. And this can be connected to the OPUS20 this way. This is the second way to power up the OPUS. And we have a third way, which is called PoE. That's an extra version. You have to order this extra if you want to use PoE, Power over Ethernet. And if you use Power over Ethernet, you can power up the OPUS with this Ethernet port here. But you have to know that if you want to use PoE, this is also a part of your configuration of your network. That means you have to connect the OPUS20 to a switch which is able to use PoE. So that has nothing to do with our OPUS and with the Luft connection. That's a thing of the customer. They need to have a PoE switch in this case, because if they do not have that, it will not work. In addition, you will always be able to put the batteries inside. Also, if you use the mini USB power supply. That means if the power is off from the power supply, the OPUS will anyway store the data because it's powered then with batteries. The OPUS20 will switch between these different possibilities. So let's go back to the presentation. So if you use batteries, the typical battery lifetime is about 1 year. But of course, the lifetime is also connected to the configuration. That means you have a scan rate and you have a store rate. And depending on the scan rate or the store rate, you will get the battery lifetime. The standard scan rate is 1 minute and the standard store rate is 10 minutes. And with this configuration, the battery will live for 1 year. If you go down with this configuration or with these values, for example, you scan every 10 seconds and you store every 1 minute, of course the lifetime will be reduced. In this case, maybe about half a year. Okay. Then we have, of course, the data storage inside the data logger. So the data logger itself can measure up to 3,200,000 values. You will have an LC display, and on the LC display you will be able to show maximum 3 values. Back to the camera. So you will see here the display, and these are the 3 different values which you can show. You have 3 segments for values, which can be configured by yourself. Then we have the one button operation. So that means if you have no possibility to connect the OPUS20 to a smart graph, for example, then you will be able to do, let's say, the basic configuration with this one button. And I will show you the button at the back side of the OPUS20 here. If you turn it to the back, then you will see the button here. And if you use the button, you click one time, you will change the menus. So that will scroll through the different menus you have. And you see on the left side, you see the M, that means menu version, which you are inside. M2, M3, M4, and so on. All the different menus are, of course, also explained in the manual. So you have different possibilities. So the basic configuration can be done with this button. So you will have the possibility to do a one-point calibration. That means if a value of the sensor is out of the specs, for example, it's 0.5 degrees Celsius too high, you can enter offset. One-point calibration means always you will be able to enter offset, which will, of course, put down or put up the complete linear temperature line. For example, minus 0.5, so you will put down the complete line with a value of 0.5 degrees. That's the one-point calibration feature, which can be entered with Smart Graph. So you need to have Smart Graph connected to the Opus in this case, if you want to do this offset. The OPUS20 can be switched from the units between Celsius degree and Celsius Fahrenheit. Also, this can be done with Smart Graph. You will have the possibility to get an optical and an acoustical alarm. That means the OPUS20 has a signal inside, and if an alarm is phased, then the horn or the beep will start. The same thing for the optical alarm. There is a little small sign on the display. I will show you. That will show up here. This one is an alarm sign. If it's permanent on the screen, that means that the value was in the past time. If it's blinking, then it's an actual alarm. All right? Right, so of course you can also get the date and the time on screen. Yes, I will show you that also. So we have the display here again, and on the right side at the bottom you will have the date and the actual time. Of course you will be able to synchronize these values with the PC. using SmartGraph again. Then you will be able to record not only actual values, you can also record minimum, maximum and average values. The OPUS20, all the different OPUS20 devices will have the possibility to store maximum 20 values. So that means you can only display 3 values on the display of the OPUS20 on the screen. But in reality you can store up to 20 values which you need to configure. And 3 of these values can be shown on the display of the OPUS20 if you want. That's very important, but you have to configure it. If you do not configure the values which you want to store, nothing will be stored. I will show you that later anyway. And of course, the last point here, we have SmartGraph 3 as an evaluation software, which is included. So you don't need to pay extra for the software. And with this software, you can do all the configuration again. You can see the different values on the screen via curves or graphs or via a table. And you can set alarm settings, you can change configuration and everything with this software. If you are interested in this software, we have an extra video for that on our homepage, www.luft.com, and on Luft TV you can also check these videos for more information about SmartGraph 3 in this case, because I will not do a SmartGraph 3 webinar today, right? It's not a SmartGraph 3 webinar. So if you need more information, you can check this video. So OPUS20 connection possibilities. So like I told you, this is not an OPUS20 with internal measurements, it's an OPUS20 with external measurement possibilities. And shown on the screen, you will see what are the possibilities here. You can store temperature data from different sensors. For example, PD100 in 3-wire and 4-wire can be connected to the OPUS. Current sensors with an current output, for example, between 0 and 20 milliamps or 4 to 20 milliamps can be connected to the OPUS, and also voltage sensors with an output from 0 to 1 volt or -1 to +1 volt. Important is here, I will show you that again. We have different interfaces for sensors here on the OPUS, right? So this connector, this black connector, it's a 10-pole connector, 10-pin connector, is used for analog sensors, and you can connect up to 2 analog sensors with this connector. And this one is another interface, this round one, and this one is used for digital Luft sensors for the 8120.TFF. And on this digital interface you can connect up to 4 digital sensors, which will look like this. These are the digital sensors here, right? And you can connect up to 4 of them. If you want to connect 4 of them, you see you have only one connector right here. You can use this T connector to extend the sensors, or to multiple the sensors here. So if you want to connect 4 of them, you need one of these T connectors. You can connect one of the OPUS, one of the sensors, and then you connect another one, and again the same thing, connect one sensor here, and so on, up to 4. The maximum amount of sensors for one interface, for one digital interface on the OPUS20 is 4. At the end you will get, because it's a combined sensor, right, temperature, humidity here, you will get 8 values, 4 times temperature, 4 times humidity, and in addition you will get also 2 values of analog sensors if you want to use them. So at the end you will get 10 different values if all the interfaces are connected. The connection itself is easy. So for the digital sensor, it's really easy. You only need to plug it in, right? That's it. For the analog sensors, you have a connector here, and this connector can be, or let's say, used with a screwdriver here. So if you want to connect the cables to this connector, normally the connector looks like that, nothing is connected, right? So you can put the screwdriver, so you need a small screwdriver, you can put the screwdriver here on the pin and push it inside. That's all. And then you see that now. Now it's disconnected, and the same thing if you want to connect it back. Zack, and that's it. Now it's connected. So that's how to use this connector. And you have to do that for all the different pins, of course. The pinning of the different sensors is also explained in the manual of the OPUS20E. So you can always check the pinning in the manual, how to connect the different sensors. So that's the connection possibilities here. Like I told you, we will have the possibility to connect PD100 sensors in 3-wire or 4-wire. So that means 2 of them maximum, of course. You will be able to connect thermocouples, type K, J and S. Also 2 of them, so, but of course you can also combine them. You can connect one PD100 on channel 1 and one thermocouple on channel 2, or the other way around. The same thing for the current sensors or the voltage sensors, so you can combine all of them. The only thing you need to know is that you can only connect up to 2 of them to one OPUS20E, right? So here is the connection again. I want to show you that because it's really important. Sometimes it's a little bit confusing how to connect the different sensors. So here, this is the connector, and I will show you how it looks like. That's the view is like this. This is the view. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So back to the diagram. All right, so this is the top, this is the bottom again. And the first 4 pins here at the top are linked to channel 1. This is CO, DO, or C0, D0, A0, B0. These are the pins for channel 1. Then we have C1, D1, A1, B1. These are the pins for channel 2. So if you want to connect one sensor to channel 1, you need to use these 4 pins. And how is described in the manual, because it's different from sensor type, of course. The same thing for channel 2. If you want to connect some sensors on channel 2, these are the pins, C1, D1, A1, B1. And then you have also 2 last pins here, pin 1 and pin 2 here, called pin 1 and pin 2. And these are used for the power supply. That means the OPUS20 can also be powered up with an external power supply. That's the difference between all the other versions of the OPUS20. Because normally if you use this type of OPUS, maybe it is also installed in a cabinet, an electrical cabinet. And then you can also use power supplies there to power up the OPUS. That's another possibility. All right, so that's it. Then we have smart graph, which is included in the delivery, right? The smart graph can be used for the configuration of the OPUS20. You can configure online queries here. That's a new thing. If you compare it to Smart Graph 2, it was not possible with Smart Graph 2. Now you can also configure online queries here, right? And we have the possibility to show numerical and graphical graphs, diagrams, and tables. And that's also an extra feature here of the Smart Graph 3. You will have the export function. That means you can export the data in Excel, in CSV, and you will have a print possibility. That means you will be able to print all the data with Smart Graph 3 on the printer. So now we are at the end of part 1, and if you have some questions, you can edit or put in the questions in the questions menu. Oh, there is one. So the question is, can the same power supply you use to power the analog sensors? Yes, you can do that. That means you can, you need to dimension the power supply in this case, and then you can use this power supply to power up the OPUS20E, and of course also an analog sensor if you want. For example, pressure sensor or CO2 sensor. Yes, that's possible. Other questions? No other questions? Oh, there's a new one. So I can connect also a V200A to the OPUS20E. Yes, you can do that. And we have done that in the past. We have, there is also an electrical diagram for this combination. And if you are interested, you can send me an email to hotline@luft.de and I can send you the electrical diagram so that you know how it will be connected. No problem. That will work. Other questions? All right, so let's go to the next part, right? So we will change now to the main menu, not to the desktop. So what we will do now is, oh no, first of all I want to show you something else. So configuration of the OPUS20. I told you you have two possibilities, right? You have the possibility to configure the OPUS20E with the Smart Graph, and you will have the possibility to configure the OPUS20E with the button. So the first thing I want to show you now is how to configure, how to do the standard or basic configuration of the OPUS20 with the button, right? So this is the Opus, and you see on the display that you get an error message E36. This is because I, of course, I have configured the display for the different sensors which we want to connect. Normally, if you get the OPUS20 from us, nothing is configured. No display configuration is done. So you can do the configuration of the external sensors with the button, but you will not see the values on the screen because you need to do that with the Smart Graph. In this case, you will see it and you see nothing is connected because it's not configured for the different sensors. We have here one analog PD100, and also I will connect this digital sensor now with the button. So the first thing, and that's the important thing, if you want to do that with the one button here at the back, the OPUS20 needs to be set into the stop mode, M2. You can only do the configuration of the external sensor if the Opus is in stop mode. But anyway, you will get this message if you want to do it or try it in record mode. You will get the message on the screen that you have to put the OPUS20 in stop mode. Then you can use the button to switch to the different menus. And our menu to enter the first sensor, which will be the digital sensor. So the first sensor I want to configure is the digital one, the TFF20, right? So we will switch to M60, and there you will see add sensor number 1. And if you want to use that, the first thing you need to do is you have to connect the digital sensor first to the interface. So connect it. So now it's connected. Now you go to the menu, M60, and this is the menu add sensor number 1, and then you hold the button. And you see now it will scan the system and the sensor is added. If you want to add another one, that's an important thing. You have to disconnect the first one. You have to use the new one, the second one, connect it again to the interface, and then you go to again to the same menu, and you see now it's called add sensor number 2. And then you can add a second one. And that's the same procedure for 4 sensors, which you have to do. So important thing is you need to disconnect the sensors which are scanned before. You cannot scan 2 sensors in one system. After you have added all the sensors, then you can connect all the 4 sensors, for example, on the interface here. So that's how to configure the digital external sensor from Luft. Again, I will connect it here so that it is connected. So the second sensor we want to connect now is this analog PD100 here. So it's not configured in the OPUS, so we need to do that. And it's the same procedure. You go with the button, you click through the menus to the menu number M81. And that's analog 0, none. You see that? You have to be quick because it will go back after some seconds. So again, M81, analog 0, none. You hold the button, then you can change the input. So you see this is 0 to 1 volt, 2 wire. This is 4 to 20 milliamps, 2 wire. This 0 to 20 milliamps, 3 wire. That's PD100 and that's our sensor. So hold the button again and then you set PD100. And that's the wrong one because it's a 3 wire here. You see that 3 wire? So we have to change it. It was a mistake from my side because we need to use the 4 wire, of course. So again, hold the button and then you can use the PD100 4 wire. And then you hold the button again and it's set. That's it. Now it's configured. Now you can scroll to M3 record mode and start your record. And you see, now you have the values on the screen, right? And now it's working. That's how to do that with the one button at the back. So there's another question here first. I think we will first answer this question. Can air pressure sensors between 0 and 1000 millibars connect to OPUS20E? Yes. The Luft sensor with this article number can be connected to the OPUS. You need to use an external power supply in this case. But it can be used in 2 wire then. And here's another question. If this sensor cannot be connected, should it be replaced by an VK sensor? Of course, you are free here. It's a standard input, an analog input for the OPUS20. I told you. Let's go back to this presentation sheet here. You see current input and voltage input. So if you use a pressure sensor from any other company which has an output between 0 and 20 milliamp or 4 to 20 milliamp, of course you can connect this to the OPUS. No problem. The only thing you need to check is the output. If it's the same output like we use as an input, then of course you can use any other kind of sensors. No restrictions here. That's the nice thing of the analog input here. So, but we stopped during the configuration of the OPUS20. And I showed you how to configure the OPUS20 with the button at the back. Now we will go to the next step. That means I will show you how to configure the OPUS20 with the Smart Graph. So of course you need to install a Smart Graph free, which you can get from our homepage www.luft.com. Again, under the support button, downloads, you will find it. You open it, and now you need to connect the OPUS20 to the software, to the port, to the USB port. We will do that now, and you will see what will happen. Because normally it will be recognized automatically from the software. You see that now on the screen. We have connected the OPUS20, and now you will get the information that this OPUS20, which I called webinar test, of course, for today, that this one is added. So it's an automatic recognition function here. So that's easy, right? For your information, because always the people ask me about drivers of the OPUS20, you do not need to install some drivers here. Why? We changed our philosophy. We integrated a special standard driver in the OPUS20, which is called HID driver. That's called Human Interface Device, which is a standard connection possibility for different devices which you can connect via USB to the Windows system. And so at the end, what you need to do, if you do that the first time, you need to connect, without Smart Graph free running, you need to connect the OPUS20 the first time to your Windows PC. The driver will be recognized and of course installed, and that's it. After that, you can connect the OPUS20 without problems to your system. So back to the configuration. So we have added now our webinar test to the Smart Graph free database. Now you click on OK, and now I will show you how or where to find the configuration menu, which is important here. So the configuration menu, you see that here, device views, it's also installed here, the webinar test. So everything is okay. So go to devices, manage devices, and that's our configuration menu here. And I will explain what are the different icons, right? So we have the first icon here, which means read device configuration. So with this button, you will always be able to read the actual configuration of the Opus if needed. Then we have this clock here. That means if you want to synchronize the device clock, you can use this button, right? Then we have this rubber. This rubber means I want to clear the memory of my OPUS20. Then we have this button, start button, that's to reset the OPUS20 to standard configuration, to factory settings. Then we have this red X, which means delete the device from the Smart Graph free database. And then we have the last icon here, which means update firmware. These are these icons here. Then if you want to change something in the configuration, you have a list on the left side. You have to click on the OPUS20 which you want to configure. So mark it, and then you have the information button here. Here you can enter the name. Like I told you, I named it webinar test. You can change the names here. Then you get some additional information, general information about the device, MAC address, project number, software version, which is important here, and all the other information. What is also important is you can disable the buzzer, the alarm buzzer here in Smart Graph. If you do not want to have it, you can disable it. And also a very important feature, you can also disable the button function at the back of the Opus. Because normally, think about, you will install the Opus in a public room. Then all the people will be able to change the configuration with the button. So you do not want to have that, right? So you can disable the device button here. But now this is the more important button here, the external sensor configuration. So again, if you click it, then you will be in the configuration menu of the external sensors. And it's divided into two parts. You have the left part and the right part. The left part is linked to the analog channels. And we have two analog channels, I told you. Channel 1, which is here called 0, and channel 2, which is called here 1. And for example, if you want to connect a PD100 4-wire, you have to open this button. Then you have the different sensors which you will be able to connect to the channel 1 in this case. And you have to choose the right one. That's the only thing you need to do. So in this case it's PD100, right? 4-wire. If you have, for example, a pressure sensor in 4 to 20 milliamps, you can use 4 to 20 milliamps 2-wire or 0 to 20 milliamps in 3-wire. Depends which type you use. But in our case it's PD100. And you will have the possibility to also connect a second one. And you have the same different sensors. You have also the possibility to connect a thermocouple, for example, type K. So it depends on your configuration, of course. And what is also very important here, you have the calculated channels which are linked to the analog channels. That means, for example, if you connect on channel 2 a 4 to 20 milliamp sensor, right? You get the information, the value in 4 to 20 milliamps, but you do not want to have that because you want to have, for example, the pressure, right? So in this case, you can say, all right, I have channel 1, and you can enter a mapping here. You can change or you can configure the numeric decimals for this value. You can configure the unit. That means how to map the 4 to 20 milliamp signal in which type of value. For example, in this case, if you talk about pressure, it should be millibar. And that's it, here, millibar. And then you can also say or configure the sensor type, which is here. For example, absolute or relative air pressure, right? And if you do that, you will get the information in the unit and in the value you want to have. That's easy, right? So this is the analog part. Then we have, of course, the digital sensor part, and that's the same thing. You see, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 sensors which you can connect to the digital interface. And you see on the interface 2, which is the first digital interface, there is one TFF still configured. If you want to delete it, you click on the X. If you want to add another one, you click on the plus. But it's the same thing. You have to disconnect the first one and connect the second one, and then you can add it with the plus. That's important because the OPUS will give the sensor an address, and addressing can only be done if one sensor is connected, not 2 or 3 of them. So that's the configuration here. That's all. So you have the possibility to do that with the button or with this menu. It's the same thing. So configuration will be written, of course, and transferred to the OPUS. Again, we go to device, manage devices. That's the first step. The second step, I told you, we need to configure which channels you want to store, right? You will be able to store up to 20 values. And this can be done under storage settings here. And there you will have a button called Select Active Channels. And you open this menu. And here you can tell the OPUS which values you want to store. So you can store battery voltage. You can store temperature digital. That's from the digital sensor. You can store the dew point, which is calculated from the temperature digital and the relative humidity measurement of the digital sensor. You can also store relative humidity values, absolute humidity values, mixing ratio values, all from the digital sensor. Then current, milliamps. I have installed one current sensor. Of course, it's not there in reality. And you have the temperature analog, which is the PD100. And now you can click up to 20 values if you want. In this case, I have added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have activated 11 values. And then you click on OK, and then the values are activated. The last thing I want to show you is, now we have 20 values which are stored, but now you can choose which of these values should be shown on the display of the Opus. I told you, maximum 3 can be shown on the display. And you will do that here in the list. Again, in the same Manage Device menu, and you will have the list here on the left side. And then you click on the value you want to see. For example, temperature digital. And the last point here is called display. You open the display button, and now you can place the temperature on the display. That means, do you want to have this temperature digital value on second place of the display, on first place, second place, or third place? So let's put it on first place. Now you will get a message that this was first set to the temperature analog. I will say OK, and now it's placed on place 1. On place 2, we want to have the relative humidity. It's here on place 3, so put it on place 2. And on place 3, we want to have the temperature analog. We will put it on 3. Now you go to OK, and the configuration will be written on your Opus. And if you now look on the display, you will see the values which you have configured now. I will show you that. Here, you see that? Temperature, digital. Relative humidity, digital. Temperature, analog. And you see the values are similar. 25.4, 25.3. So also the measurements are really accurate of both, right? Same level. Okay, so that's the configuration. Now, do you have some additional questions? I wanted to show you how to read out the values, right? That was a question before. So I will change back to Smart Graph. Now you have configured everything. You have to set, of course, the OPUS20 to M3 record mode. Because if you do not set it on record mode, it will not record data. So that's really important. Set the OPUS20 on record mode, then the OPUS20 will start to record or store the values. Now if you want to read out the values, of course, you go to Device, Poll Devices. Now we have our Opus here, Webinar Test. It's connected to USB, right? And then you say, okay, you don't need to use start date because that's only if you want to read out a special range of the OPUS20 data. Normally you want to read out the complete memory, so you do not need to use the start date function here. You only need to click on OK. Now the data will be read out. You see that? And now they will be put into the diagram. And you will have the actual data now in the diagrams here. That's easy. I think that's the same procedure like with the standard OPUS20 THI or THIP or TCO, right? So that's nothing special. The most important thing is you have to activate the channels which you want to store, and you have to set the OPUS20 after that in record mode. And after that you can read out the data without problems. All right? Okay, I think there are no other questions. So that's the end of our today's webinar. I want to thank you very much for your interest. Hopefully we will meet again in the next webinars. We will have next webinars in the future, of course. Please check our homepage. Under the news function or news side, you will get the information about the next webinars. Of course, you will get maybe also a newsletter with the information about the next starting webinars. So thank you very much. Have a nice day and bye-bye.